Hey, I'm Dr. Maury, and today I'm presenting a workshop for the 2024 International Congress for Qualitative Research and Theory Methodologies. So today's workshop is on the listening guide analytic method. And during this workshop, you'll learn about the listening guide as a method and a methodology. You'll discover its history, its theoretical background, and you will learn why the listening guide is different from other qualitative methods. Next, we'll collect data so that you can experience one of the listening of the method. And then you'll learn how to conduct each listening and the final analysis. Finally, I will read a summary example of each listening in Maury 2023. So, what is the listening guide method? So, it is a qualitative, relational, voice centered feminist methodology that has been used in narrative inquiries, autoethnographies, and case studies. And Gilligan and Eddy said it is applicable whenever there is a first person voice, including in the analysis of diaries, letters, speeches, narratives, and even Supreme Court opinions. It is a systematic and rigorous method that goes deep into participants' psyches. The method facilitates a kind of listening that takes the reader to a different place. It is a disruptive method, and according to Brown and Gilligan, it is a relational act and an embodied experience. It really differs from traditional thematic analysis, which focuses on the content of what is being said. The listening guide method focuses on how the content is spoken and looks at the changes in voice across the telling. So, the history of the method. In the mid 1980s, feminist psychologist Carol Gilligan started to meet with 11 of her graduate students at Harvard University. They met to create a new non binary method for analyzing qualitative data. And this search for a new method grew out of a frustration with the traditional analytic methods that used codes and categorizations in psychological research. So this group met for several years. And in the late 1980s, uh, researcher Lynn Brown turned this work into a book, The Guide to Reading Narratives of Conflict and Choice for Self and Relational Voices. So in 1990, Carol Gilligan changed the name of the method to the Listening Guide. So the theoretical background. Um, so Four theories influence the listening guide analytic method. The first one is the relational psychological theory, which is grounded in feminist research and asserts that for many women, constructing the self takes place within meaningful relationships. The second one is the psychoanalytic theory, which focuses on the unconscious and the multiplicity of voices. Then, the literary theory, which defines how to learn from a text. It is where the listener observes his or her reactions, thoughts, and feelings. And finally, the music theory, where researchers pay attention to voice, resonance, and counterpoint. So the listening guide is a pathway into participants' unconscious, where the researcher listens to different voices, each voice telling a different story about the participant. So before we go further, I would like for us to take a short break in the presentation. We're going to collect data so that you can experience one of the listenings of the method. So please grab a pen and a piece of paper. And so you can write notes and or you can also write on your tablet or computer or your phone. And here is the question that I'm asking today. How did you experience finding out that you would have to stay in lockdown for some time when the COVID-19 outbreak was declared a pandemic? So it'd be great if you could write at least 5 short sentences answering the question. I'm gonna stay silent, but still be here for a couple of minutes so you can do this. So the listening guide has a specific listening process, which consists of 3 distinct listening, each one taking researchers deeper into their participants in the world. So the first one is listening for the plot, and it involves situating the narrative within its multiple contexts by asking what, when, where, why, and with whom questions. The second one is listening for the I with its associative logic. It helps the researcher enter the participant's inner world. The purpose of this listening is to listen to how the participants speak about himself or herself. And finally, the listening for contrapuntal voices is where the researcher listens to what is said and not said within the participants' multi layered voices in contradiction or not. So, researchers need to approach each listening with non judgmental curiosity and put themselves in their participants' shoes. They need to listen and try to experience their story. And then researchers need to pull back and notice how listening to the story affected them. They also need to become aware of their participants' unconscious telling that is intrinsically tied to their experience. And then I will explain how to proceed with these different listenings in the next 3 slides. So, listening for the plot, which is the first listening, it must be descriptive and specific in situating the narrative within its multiple contexts. Here, The researchers ask questions about what, when, where, why, and with whom. This steps involves observing emotions, looking for the unexpected, noting metaphors, images, observing contradictions and gaps, and also positioning the researcher within the research. This is called the researcher's response or the reader or listener response. And it involves the researcher immersing themselves in the experience rather than remaining detached. And throughout this process, every personal emotion, question, assumption, and reaction to the data is meticulously documented. So, this is crucial in establishing a clear distinction between the researcher's voice and that of the participant. So, when I start to work on the listening for the plot, I ask myself, what surprised me? What was different? And then I read the text and use different colors to carefully highlight the repeated words, the topics, I their verbal behaviors, emotions, and silences. And then I watch the video recording again. And there I note the silences, the smiles, the expressions of doubts, their tone of voice, their emotions, and the gestures I noticed, those that I expected or not. I also include my participants' demographic information in here because it's an integral part of their context. So, really, the listening for the plot reveals how participants want to appear in their stories and how the researcher is affected by their telling. Listening for the eye. So, Tolman and Head explain that something that I really relate to or like. Uh, they said that listening for the eye is tuning up the volume on how the narrator represents himself. This listening focuses on the self voice. What do the participants say when they refer to themselves? How do they see themselves? What are they trying to say about themselves? Are they switching pronouns when they speak about themselves? And if so, what does it say about themselves? So now the process. So as researchers, you first need to underline every I plus verb combination in the text. And sometimes you can add an adjective or an adverb, but it's not that often. Then you should line them up in the order they appear in the text. Remember, the associative logic of the I poems reveal unconscious desires and struggles. By the way, these I poems are also called voice poems. So now that you understand the process of creating an I poem from data, you can make your I poem using the sentences you wrote during the break we took earlier. So in the comments below, if you feel like it, you can write your I poem and tell us what it feels like for you to read it. I'll leave you a couple of minutes for you to comment. So, listening for contrapuntal voices. So, first, a contrapuntal music has two or more separate tunes played or sung at the same time. Contrapuntal voices mean to line up the different voices participants use when they tell their stories. And in research, contrapuntal voices are about capturing the rich, multi layered nature of participant stories. Essentially, it's about listening to what is said and what remains unsaid. Gilligan and Eddy emphasize that a voice is not a theme. Instead, a voice is like an instrument of the psyche, embodying unique sounds, tones, rhythms, and musicality. So, how do we approach this listening? Well, this step is a long and meticulous process of listening. You must tune into the tone, rhythm, pace, and overall musicality of each voice as it appears in participants' narrative. This means revisiting and re listening to interviews, paying close attention to where and how different voices emerge. It's not a one time thing. There will probably be several trials of listening to voices and their musicality in participants' words and sentences, noticing changes in pace, tone, and pitch until you find the ones that stood out in your participant stories. So, this consists of listening to a possible voice, describing it, explaining its relevance, keeping it, or looking for another one. Then also you'll need to re-listen to the video recordings again and again to hear where each voice appears. And there will probably be several more trials of listenings. So Gilligan's described this process beautifully, noting that listening for contrapuntal voices picks up the tensions, the harmonies, and dissonances between voices and underscores the musical aspects of listening, where the goal is to listen for nuance, for modulations, and silence. So, completing the analysis, take a step back. So, in the literature on the listening guide, some researchers added a fourth or fifth listening to their analysis, which was not originally part of the Gilligan first listening guide. So some used these additional listening for cultural context, for emotional resonance, for voice analysis, or just for the final interpretation of the data. Here, I'll just give you some tips on how to proceed with this analysis and take a step back to complete it. You'll need to start with your research question and then step back from the three listenings. You'll have to read again what you wrote for your listenings and see how they refer to your research question. You need to take a step back again and reflect and notice how the three listenings answered your question, each differently. And for that, you can ask, what have I learned from the progression from one listening to the next? How does each listening bring additional answers and a different perspective to my research question? How do they all work together to answer my research question? How do they all complement each other? What theoretical background comes up with this analysis? And as the researcher, what can I see that my participants cannot see? Can I zoom in and out of the three listenings to see the big picture? So, Now I'm gonna read uh, to you an example from Maury 2023. It's really a summarize here of the listening for the plot, and the next slide will be for the other listenings. So Naomi is a 40-year-old Black single mother living in the southern US. She experienced significant hardships during the COVID-19 pandemic. In March 2020, she lost her housing and moved with her two young children into a hotel where they stayed for 7 months. Despite her challenging circumstances, Naomi remained calm and confident, presenting her experience with resilience and creativity. She reframed their situation as a staycation, creating fun memories for children by building forts with sheets and furniture while keeping their true circumstances hidden from them. I was struck by Naomi's demeanor during the interview. Her calmness and positive attitude were evident even as she recounted her struggles. She sacrificed her own health and nutrition, often working late at night to balance her job and her children's needs, leading to severe depression and sleep deprivation. I felt a deep sense of empathy toward Naomi, who had limited social support with family living far away and friends in worse situations. The single working mother's attempts to seek help from work and various resources were mostly unsuccessful, leading her to stop asking for assistance due to overwhelming need. I saw an irony in Naomi's situation. While she was helping others through her job, she struggled to receive help herself. Nonetheless, Naomi found purpose in assisting others, which helped her cope with her own difficulties. She frequently used water metaphors, reflecting her love for the ocean and rain, which symbolized her resilience and hope. Naomi described resilience as a trait she was born with, developed through a difficult childhood. She viewed her experience of homelessness during the pandemic as a spiritual test that ultimately strengthened her. She felt grateful for the small joys in life and appreciated her ability to grow from her challenges. Now, in a better situation with a new job and home, Naomi is working to improve state policies to prevent food insecurity for others above the poverty level. I was deeply moved by Naomi's story and her ability to find gratitude and purpose amid adversity. So I'm continuing Naomi's analysis, and this time it's the listening for the eye. I'm going to read it first her eye poem. I will say, I can't really tell. I can't just tell. I believed. I couldn't see. I believed. I knew I was gonna get out. I didn't know. I didn't see. You can make it. You are going to learn and grow. And now it's how I analyzed her eye poem. So Naomi used the present, past, and future tenses to express herself. The I poem revealed a back and forth in time and between her beliefs and disbeliefs. She used the I pronoun to represent herself, except at the end, where she used you. Switching to the you pronoun distanced herself from what was said. Her subconscious mind seemed to be talking to her and telling her that she would make it. The poem revealed a struggle I hadn't noticed in our interview. She may not have been as confident as I thought, and I felt that she was trying to convince herself. She pretended to be happy in front of her children. Did she pretend to be confident during our interview? Did she mirror who she wanted to be? So now I'm gonna list two for the third listening from contrapuntal voices. So I'm gonna use examples of two voices where I heard Naomi's voices. So the first one is the voice of compassion and gratefulness versus voice of frustration. So Naomi's voice of compassion and gratefulness sounded enthusiastic. The woman spoke in a fast-paced, high-pitched voice, laughing at times as she discussed the families with special need children she helped through her work. She recognized that helping others helped her survive these challenging times. She explained, even though I didn't have options, that didn't stop me from helping others, and that was rewarding in itself. I noticed the difference between her voice of compassion and gratefulness and her voice of frustration, which was monotonous, low pitched, and upset. She confessed, I could help other people, but couldn't help dig myself and my kids a part of this space. So now I'll talk about another voice also that I saw, which is the fighter voice versus the surrender voice. I heard Naomi's confident and high-pitched fighter voice as she narrated her family's unhoused situation. She said, my children never went hungry. I knew I would get us out of here. Naomi was resourceful. She asked for help and contacted the housing unit at her work, where she learned to become a homeowner. I also heard the single mother's low-pitched surrender voice when she noticed the beauty around her. Naomi learned from her mother to notice the small things. She also learned from nature to accept what she could not control. She revealed, I just appreciate all those things, especially those natural things, because you can't control them and you gotta adjust to them as they come. So today you learned about the history, theoretical background, and process of the listening guide analytic method. You also experienced writing an I poem with your data and heard summaries from Naomi's 3 listenings from Maury 2023. This feminist, qualitative, time-intensive method taught me to listen differently and took me deep into my participants' unconscious in unexpected ways. So in the next slide, I give you a comprehensive list of references on the listening guide analytic method. Also, if you're interested in learning more about Maury's study, resilience during the COVID-19 pandemic, experience of single working mothers, please listen to my 30-minute recorded presentation.